We start with the Browns here, joined by our buddy from CBS Sports Radio. Of course, you hear him from time to time, but also 92.3 The Fan out there in Cleveland, one of the main sources, and that is Ken Carman. Ken, what's happening, buddy? How are you?
I'm doing well, guys. Thanks for having me.
You got it. All right, so listen, the scale of emotion for fans goes something like this. Despair. Well, let me take that back. Apathy, despair, and sometimes those could flip-flop, optimism, and then actual hope. What I find so interesting about you guys is that you're so far beyond hope. Clearly, your roster is phenomenal, and clearly you guys have a real chance to get to the Super Bowl this year. I wonder how the fans, how people like yourself, hosts, how are you guys dealing with what is legitimate, real, palpable enthusiasm? Any fear or gung-ho conviction?
Well, it was just about in 2019 when they came off the 7-8-1 season where there was a lot of hope to save. And then they had just made the trade for Odell to say that they would be a really good football team that year. And then things really blew up in their face. Now, part of that was, coaching staff. Part of that was Baker was a bit immature that season, and he would say the same thing. So I think that's really fresh in a lot of people's minds. I don't think it's a fear. I just think it's an anticipation to get the season going. I think they have a lot of confidence in Kevin Stefanski and then Baker Mayfield and some of the other players on this football team. But I really don't think there's as many people who are stuck in the past of woe is me and same old Browns as maybe I thought there'd be. Maybe because of Kevin Stefanski, maybe just because there is so much talent on the team that unless something really outside of the team's control, like injuries were to happen, would point to this thing going wrong this year.
One of the important names, obviously, you just mentioned is Odell Beckham Jr. And, I mean, his career is so interesting because it's going to be meteoric when he first started with the Giants, and then he got mercurial, and then they couldn't wait to get rid of him, and we know what obviously would happen in when he got to Cleveland. It's a great duo between him and Jarvis Landry, obviously college teammates. Where is he in relation to the future plan, or current and future plans of this Brown squad?
I think we take it year by year. I think it's a relationship that probably can't be continued long term just because of the money that's wrapped up in him. If they have the type of season they want to have this year, they'll have to pay Baker Mayfield. There's a couple other people across this football team that they'll have to pay. So it turns into a year by year type of deal with him. I think for him personally, I think he's at a crossroads. I mean, he was known, just like you said, as the top playmaker in the NFL. That reputation has really gone away. The injuries have mounted, and there's questions of just what he can give to a football team. And so for the Browns, they may have to move on just to keep everything under the cap and to maximize the value that they have at the most important positions. But for himself, it's a huge year because he needs to get his reputation back nationally. And also, if he wants to get paid again, he's got to be able to put together the stats might be difficult, but over 1,000 yards, that shouldn't be too difficult to ask or too much to ask that type of guy. But also the big plays, the third downs, the touchdowns, the things that he's known to do. He's got to do that, and he's got to be able to do that in the playoffs with this team. So his first priority is to stay healthy. His second priority is to work with Baker and in this offense. And by that time, something should open up for him outside of the Browns.
All right, so we're talking to Ken Carman. He is host out in Cleveland, 92.3 The Fan, also on CBS Sports Radio here. So what is the weak point? What is the definitive weakness on this roster? Linebacker? I'm not even, what is it? What jumps out?
I would still say defensive line. I think that they wanted to get better, and it's kind of been a little bit of a mixed bag so far throughout this camp. They got Pat McKinley off of free agency, but he stayed out for some personal reasons for a couple of weeks. He seems to be back, but I don't know how much really you can hope to get from him. Jadeveon Clowney is frequently banged up. He's a big name, but he's frequently banged up. He has the right attitude, seems to be a really good teammate, but you don't know how many games you're going to be able to get out of Jadeveon Clowney. The other ones, you got Tommy Togiai, who's a fourth-round pick. They're either very young or they just haven't been able to put together what the Browns have really wanted. Malik Jackson should be able to help, but he's not a guy who's going to swallow up double teams. So there's going to be a couple of question marks there on the interior, especially early because the number ones, the starters, haven't played with each other defensively this year. So Joe Woods wants to play a lot of dime. They want a lot of defensive backs out there on the field, but they've had injuries there. They've had hamstring issues throughout this camp. So I think it's going to be a slow start defensively. And if there is a weak point, I do still think it's that defense.
You know, Ken, one of the when you talk about the defense, they have some pretty interesting offenses that they're going to go up against, especially in the division. Big Ben with all of the offensive weapons that he has. Obviously, when you look at Lamar Jackson and his just dynamic running ability, which makes their run game so daunting. Could this become a Browns team, given what you just said, that has to outscore teams? And if they are, do they have the capabilities of doing that, especially because they're centered around the run primarily?
There's going to be a couple of games where you just have to. I mean, you mentioned Kansas City. Baltimore is always a very tough team to deal with. I don't think that Pittsburgh's just going to lay down for anybody at the beginning of the year. I want to know what happens with them as he gets older in his season, talking about Ben Roethlisberger.
Yeah.
So Buffalo's going to be somewhere out there offensively, and they can gun out just about anybody. And we'll see what the Chargers do this year. And there's a couple other teams. But I think there's going to be just some spots naturally where they're going to have to be able to do that. Defensively, they can come up with a big stop because Myles Garrett is still one of the best in the business. And if they're able to stay healthy, they can still create some turnovers. But that can still be a luck thing, not necessarily a stop them and get off the field type of thing and be able to pound out teams. So they might have to go out there and outscore some opponents this year, yeah.
Listen, obviously, Ben, at his age, it is what it is, so we'll just see, how much more attrition there is or maybe a little bounce back. The arm's fully regenerated here. We'll see. In the instance of Lamar Jackson, I know you have to talk about this all the time. You have to incorporate the opponents. Do you view Lamar Jackson as a bit of a depreciating asset, somebody who's still developing and ascending? Like, when you talk about the Ravens and Lamar specifically throwing the ball, are you bullish or are you not sure? I'm curious how you guys take that inside of Ohio.
I'm still bullish on Lamar. I think the fans are a little bit split because he plays for the Ravens, so they don't want him to do well. And he was coming off an MVP year. Well, if you're coming off an MVP year, it's hard to repeat in this league as an MVP. So I think there was going to be a little bit of a regression last year. They put it on the wide receivers in Baltimore. I'm not altogether too sure, but he's still such an electric asset to have. I got to feel Greg Roman's got to be able to figure something out there, and that's something that scares me. They're still a well-coached football team, and I think that they're a team that's going to vie for the division right with us. I do think that the Browns are deeper, but Lamar Jackson, I think he accounts for a couple players on the offense. I wonder if we've reached his ceiling statistically, but I think anybody who's underrating Lamar Jackson is going to do so at their own peril.
Ken, tell me about Baker Mayfield's contract situation. Do we know, what the urgency is, or is this kind of we need to see you one more year? Where is this contract situation, especially given what Josh Allen just signed for and some of these other what we know now are guaranteed franchise guys for some of these squads?
It seems to be pretty slow. I think that both sides are probably comfortable with waiting out the season. Baker's a former number one pick, and in that first year, he really did change the culture of the team. And then I think maybe he wanted to take a little bit too much power before he was ready to have that power. Maybe a little bit of unnatural leadership, if you will. But now he's put together one good year. He needs another good year. They need it proven to them. I don't blame them for them wanting it to be proven to them, because I don't know if there's any third direction. I don't know if he's getting a decent contract or something that's just in the stratosphere of $40+ million. I think it's more either $40+ million or they're moving on. I think that's kind of how this thing's looking. So they want to make sure that he's going to be worth that money, and he certainly wants to prove to everybody that he's worth that money. So I think both sides are actually kind of okay with waiting around here.
All right. Obviously, one of the marquee teams. Boy, it sounds odd saying that, but it's not. It is a good story to see, man. We've always been listen, maybe it's my Jet fandom. Maybe it's just appreciating blue-collar people, blue-collar roots. I love this. I think it's a great story. I've always been pulling for you guys, and we'll see what you guys make of the season. But we will be watching, no doubt. Appreciate you, Ken. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe, and don't forget to hit that bell to be notified when we drop fresh content.